I need a boyfriend by tomorrow. A millionaire would be even better. Sarah Griffin whispered the words into her phone from the quietest corner of the marble kitchen. Her voice broke before she could laugh at how impossible the request sounded. At 24, Sarah had already learned that desperation rarely produced miracles. It usually produced overdue bills, sleepless nights, and choices that pride would never approve of. She wore the pale blue uniform of the housekeeping staff at the Whitmore estate, a sprawling mansion overlooking the marshes outside Savannah, Georgia. Her brown hair was tied back, and her hands smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. She had worked there for nearly 2 years, arriving before sunrise and leaving after the rooms shone. "Mom, please understand," she said. "Vanessa's wedding is tomorrow. If I arrive alone, she'll make a spectacle of me again." Her mother, Margaret, sighed on the other end. "You cannot create a boyfriend overnight." "I know. And you certainly cannot order a millionaire like a bouquet." Sarah wiped her eyes. "At the last family wedding, Vanessa introduced me as the cousin who scrubs rich people's floors. Everyone laughed. Tomorrow she'll say, 'No man wants me because I'm destined to remain a servant.' That is not true. Maybe it is." Sarah had left college when her father became ill. After his death, the medical debts remained, along with rent, medicine for her mother, and the quiet disappointment of a future interrupted. Vanessa, meanwhile, had inherited money from an elderly relative and was marrying the son of a prosperous hotel owner. Sarah had never envied the wedding. She envied the respect. "I have to go," she whispered. "Mr. Whitmore could return at any moment." What she did not know was that Daniel Whitmore stood beyond the half-open library door. At 46, Daniel owned one of the largest construction and restoration companies along the southern coast. He had entered the kitchen wing, looking for documents, and stopped when he heard Sarah crying. Until that moment, she had been a quiet presence in his house. He knew that she arrived early, worked carefully, and rarely spoke unless necessary. He knew the sound of her cart in the hall, and that she always placed fresh flowers near his late father's photograph. He had never wondered why. After Sarah ended the call, she stared through the window at the sun spreading across the marsh grass. "A boyfriend for tomorrow," she murmured bitterly, as though they sell those downtown. Daniel stepped backward before she saw him. His phone vibrated. A message from his younger sister, Catherine, appeared on the screen. "Do not forget the Prescott wedding tomorrow. Mother expects you to attend, and Aunt Rebecca says she has invited 3 women for you to meet." Daniel read it twice. He had spent years negotiating contracts worth millions, yet family gatherings still made him feel like a disappointing child. His relatives regarded his bachelorhood as a public failure, especially after his former fiancée had left him for another man. Then, an absurd idea formed. He returned to the kitchen. "Sarah." She spun around, nearly dropping the cloth in her hand. "Mr. Whitmore, I did not hear you." "I heard your conversation." The color left her face. "I am sorry. I should not have used my phone while working. It will not happen again. Please, I need this job." "I am not dismissing you." She stared at him. "Then why are you telling me?" "Because I may have a solution." She placed the cleaning cart between them as though it were a shield. "What kind of solution?" "I also need someone to accompany me to a wedding tomorrow." Sarah blinked. Daniel continued calmly. "You need a boyfriend so your cousin cannot humiliate you. I need a companion so my family stops treating me like an unfinished project. We could help each other. You are suggesting that we pretend to be a couple. For one day." A nervous laugh escaped her. "You own half the restored hotels in this city. I clean your house. No one would believe us. People believe whatever confirms their expectations. If we appear certain, they will invent the details for us." Sarah searched his face for mockery, but found none. "What do you gain?" "One peaceful evening. Perhaps the pleasure of shocking my aunt." "And what do you expect from me?" "Nothing beyond the performance." Sarah looked down at her reddened hands. The proposal sounded foolish, dangerous, and strangely kind. I need time to think. The wedding begins tomorrow afternoon. He turned toward the library. You have until tonight. That evening, Sarah lay awake in the small apartment she shared with her mother. She told Margaret everything, expecting alarm. Instead, her mother sat beside her and held her hand. It is reckless, Margaret admitted, but so is allowing fear to choose your life every time. He is my employer. Then set rules. What if it goes badly? Margaret smiled wearily. For once, ask what might happen if it goes well. Before dawn, Sarah made her decision. She arrived at the estate while Daniel was drinking coffee in the dining room. I accept, she said, but I have conditions. He set down his papers. I am listening. This ends after the wedding. My family can never know it began as an arrangement. At work, nothing changes. You remain my employer, and I remain your employee. Daniel nodded. Agreed. I have one condition. In public, you call me Daniel. Sarah swallowed. All right, Daniel. Hearing his name in her voice changed the air between them. Neither understood why. They spent the morning constructing a believable history. According to their story, they had met 6 months earlier at a charity reception organized by the Whitmore Foundation. Sarah had been assisting the event coordinator. Daniel had approached her during a break, and she had pointed out a stain on his tie instead of flattering him. That part sounds believable, Daniel said. Because you often spill things? Because you have never shown the slightest interest in impressing me. You never showed much interest in speaking to the people who worked in your home. Daniel accepted the criticism without defensiveness. Perhaps I should have. The quiet sincerity of his answer made Sarah look away. They memorized small details. Their first dinner had supposedly been at a modest seafood restaurant near River Street. Sarah preferred tea to coffee. Daniel hated crowded elevators. They had disagreed about old houses. He saw structures to preserve, while she saw rooms where families might begin again. The invented memories gradually became conversations about their real lives. Sarah told him that she once wanted to become a social worker. Daniel admitted that his father had expected him to inherit the company before he had learned whether he wanted it. By late morning, Daniel's assistant, Rachel Price, arrived with a garment bag and an efficient smile. Mr. Whitmore asked me to take you shopping. Sarah stiffened. That is not necessary. It is, Daniel said. You need something suitable for both weddings. Both. My family's wedding takes place at the same hotel as your cousin's reception. The ballrooms are on adjoining floors. We can attend yours first and mine afterward. Sarah stared at him. So we must fool two families in one evening? That appears to be the situation. Rachel drove Sarah downtown to a boutique she would never have entered alone. The saleswoman brought gowns covered in sequins and silk, but Sarah felt disguised in each one. Rachel finally chose a deep green dress, with simple lines and long sleeves. It was elegant without appearing extravagant. When Sarah faced the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The dress did not transform her into someone wealthy. It revealed that dignity had been present all along. You look beautiful, Rachel said. Sarah touched the fabric. How much does it cost? That concern belongs to Mr. Whitmore. I do not want him buying me things. Then regard it as wardrobe required for the performance. Sarah agreed reluctantly. That night, Daniel received another call from Catherine. You are truly bringing someone? She demanded. Yes. Who is she? You will meet her tomorrow. Mother is already planning where to seat her. Tell Mother not to interrogate her. Catherine laughed. You must care about this woman if you are warning us in advance. After the call, Daniel stood by the library window. 2 years earlier, he had been engaged to Irene Dalton, the daughter of a wealthy banking family. Their parents had encouraged the match, and Daniel had mistaken compatibility for love. Irene ended the engagement publicly. She left for Europe with another businessman and allowed society columns to turn Daniel's pain into entertainment. Since then, every formal dinner had included pity, speculation, or an introduction to another suitable woman. His proposal to Sarah had begun as convenience. Yet he could no longer pretend convenience explained everything. He remembered hearing despair in her voice and recognizing it. Wealth had protected him from unpaid bills, but not from humiliation. He understood the exhaustion of being measured by other people's standards. The following afternoon, Sarah returned to the estate wearing the green dress. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Daniel, dressed in a dark navy suit, forgot what he intended to say. Sarah noticed his silence. "Is something wrong?" "No. You look concerned." "The dress is perfect," he said. "I was distracted." Edward, Daniel's longtime driver, opened the car door for them. During the journey, Sarah repeated their invented history until Daniel gently interrupted. "Stop memorizing. If I forget something, we are finished. The safest thing is to remain yourself. Myself is terrified." "Then remain terrified honestly." She laughed despite her nerves. Near the hotel, Edward cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitmore, there is something you should know. I saw Miss Dalton enter a few minutes ago." Daniel's shoulders tightened. "Irene is here? She appears to be attending the Prescott wedding." Sarah studied him. "Your former fiancé?" He nodded. "She left me in a manner the entire city enjoyed discussing." Sarah reached for his hand before she could reconsider. "Then our performance must be excellent." "You do not owe me that. We made an agreement." She gave him a determined smile. "Besides, I would like to see the expression of a woman foolish enough to leave you." Daniel laughed, and the tension in the car eased. When they reached the entrance, he offered his hand. "Ready?" Sarah placed her fingers in his. "No, but let us go anyway." Together they stepped into the hotel, each believing they were carrying a harmless lie. Neither understood that the truth had already begun growing inside it. Vanessa's reception filled the lower ballroom with white roses, crystal chandeliers, and relatives who had perfected the art of smiling while judging one another. Sarah saw her mother first. Margaret sat beside Aunt Carol, looking toward the entrance with visible anxiety. Then Carol noticed Daniel. "Sarah, you came." Her eyes moved over his tailored suit and composed expression. "I would like you to meet Daniel Whitmore," Sarah said. Daniel shook Carol's hand warmly. "Sarah has told me a great deal about her family." "Whitmore," Carol repeated. "As in Whitmore Coastal Restoration?" "The same." Several nearby guests turned their heads. Sarah's mother rose and embraced her. Against Sarah's ear, she whispered, "Are you managing?" "Barely. You look stronger than you feel." Before Sarah could answer, Vanessa approached in her wedding gown. Her smile was lovely from a distance and sharp up close. "I am surprised you came," Vanessa said. "I assumed you would be too busy cleaning someone's house." The familiar shame rose in Sarah's chest. Daniel rested one hand at her waist. "We have not been introduced," he said. Vanessa's expression changed when she heard his name. "Daniel Whitmore." "Yes. Sarah has indeed been busy, though not in the way you suggested. She has had difficulty fitting me into her schedule." Sarah almost smiled. Vanessa looked between them. "You are together?" "For several months," Sarah said. "We kept it private." "And it has become quite serious," Daniel added. He looked at Sarah with such warmth that she briefly forgot the words were part of an arrangement. Vanessa forced a polite laugh. "Well, congratulations." After she walked away, Sarah released the breath she had been holding. "You rescued me." "No," Daniel said. "I merely prevented her from stealing your moment." His hand remained at her waist longer than necessary. Later, as guests gathered for dinner, Sarah noticed a tall woman in a red gown crossing the ballroom. Daniel stiffened beside her. "Irene," he said quietly. Irene Dalton stopped before them with the polished confidence of someone accustomed to being welcomed everywhere. "Daniel, I did not expect to see you." "I could say the same." Irene turned to Sarah. "And who is this?" "Sarah Griffin," Sarah replied. "My partner," Daniel added. Irene's gaze moved over Sarah's dress, posture, and hands. "You have changed your preferences," she said. "She is certainly different from the women you used to choose." The insult was wrapped in elegance, but its meaning remained clear. Daniel's voice cooled. "You are right. Sarah is honest. She speaks to me rather than to my surname, and she has never mistaken affection for a business arrangement. I value those differences now." Irene's smile tightened. "I am glad you are well." She left before Daniel could reply. Sarah saw something vulnerable beneath his calm expression. "Are you all right?" "Better than I expected." "Because you defeated her?" "No. Because I finally saw that her opinion no longer controls how I see myself." Sarah understood that feeling too well. During dinner, Aunt Carol asked how Daniel had won Sarah's affection. "She was unimpressed by me," Daniel said. "At our first meeting, everyone else wanted favors. Sarah told me I had sauce on my tie." The table laughed. "That sounds exactly like her," Margaret said proudly. The invented memory felt strangely possible, as though it belonged to another life they might have lived. When music began, Daniel rose and offered Sarah his hand. "Will you dance with me?" On the floor, his palm rested lightly against her back. Sarah moved carefully at first, afraid of stepping on his shoes. "You are thinking too much," he said. "I am dancing with my employer in front of half of Savannah. Tonight, I am simply Daniel. That is not simple." They fell quiet. Around them, couples turned beneath warm lights. For the first time that evening, no one was questioning them. "Thank you," Sarah said. "For what?" "For letting me feel included instead of tolerated." Daniel looked at her steadily. "These last 2 days have felt more honest than most of the last 2 years." Sarah's steps slowed. "This ends tonight." "I remember." "Then why say that?" "Because the agreement required us to lie to everyone else, not to each other." He brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "I have spent nearly 2 years walking past you without seeing you. Now I find that you are brave, intelligent, and more genuine than anyone I have met in a very long time." Sarah's heart beat painfully. "Daniel?" He leaned closer, slowly enough for her to step away. She did not. Before the distance between them disappeared, a bright voice interrupted. "Daniel Whitmore, are you hiding from your own family?" Aunt Rebecca stood at the edge of the dance floor, dressed in pearl silk and enough jewelry to finance Sarah's rent for years. Daniel stepped back. "Aunt Rebecca." Rebecca looked at Sarah with frank curiosity. "So this is the mysterious woman everyone is discussing." Daniel took Sarah's hand. "This is Sarah." Rebecca studied her before smiling. "You are not what I expected." Sarah prepared herself for an insult. Instead, Rebecca said, "But I have not seen my nephew smile like this in years. That speaks in your favor." The music changed, and the fragile moment was lost. Yet as Daniel led Sarah from the dance floor, both knew something had happened. The arrangement no longer felt like an act they could simply end at midnight. The remainder of dinner passed more easily, until Franklin Vance approached their table. Franklin was a developer known for expensive suits, loud opinions, and a habit of remembering facts that benefited him. "Daniel Whitmore," he said. "We met at a builders' convention in Florida." "I remember." Franklin's attention shifted toward Sarah. "You look familiar." Sarah's stomach tightened. "I do? Did you work at a charity banquet last spring? Perhaps serving guests?" "I think you are mistaken." Franklin continued staring. "I rarely forget a face." Daniel stepped closer to Sarah. Then this must be a rare evening. Sarah works in property administration. The lie came smoothly, but Sarah felt herself trembling. Franklin apologized without appearing convinced. Soon afterward, he joined Aunt Rebecca and whispered something that made her glance toward Sarah. "We should leave," Sarah murmured. "If we leave suddenly, it will create more suspicion. I cannot keep inventing details." Daniel lowered his voice. "You do not have to. Stay beside me." Aunt Rebecca called them over. "Franklin believes he has seen Sarah working at an event." "He is mistaken," Daniel said. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Even if he were correct, honest work is not a crime." Relief passed through Sarah, though Franklin's expression remained doubtful. The danger seemed to fade after another hour. Guests returned to dancing, and Vanessa disappeared for photographs. Then Sarah visited the powder room. As she emerged, Rachel approached her. "You look wonderful," Rachel said. "Mr. Whitmore made an excellent choice, asking you to accompany him. I hope this means your work at the estate may become more pleasant." Rachel noticed Vanessa behind Sarah too late. "Work at the estate?" Vanessa repeated. Rachel attempted to correct herself. "I meant foundation work." But Vanessa's eyes had already brightened with cruel understanding. "You work for him." Sarah's throat closed. "Vanessa, please. You clean his house, do you not?" Several guests turned toward them. Vanessa lifted her voice. "My cousin brought her employer and pretended he was her boyfriend." "Do not do this here," Sarah whispered. But Vanessa was already calling relatives closer. She was so afraid of arriving alone that she convinced the millionaire whose floors she scrubs to play her date. Murmurs spread through the hallway. Sarah saw her mother pushing through the gathering crowd. Margaret's face held no anger, only fear for her daughter. The humiliation Sarah had tried to avoid now seemed larger than anything Vanessa might have said if she had arrived alone. Daniel appeared at the edge of the group. "What is happening?" Vanessa folded her arms. "We discovered the truth. Sarah is not your partner. She is your housekeeper." Daniel came to Sarah's side. "That is true." Sarah turned toward him in shock. Vanessa smiled triumphantly. Daniel continued. "Sarah works in my home. Yesterday, I overheard her speaking to her mother. She feared being humiliated at this wedding, precisely as you are humiliating her now. I suggested that we attend together." The crowd became silent. Vanessa looked pleased. "So, you admit it was false?" "It began as an arrangement." Daniel took Sarah's hand openly. "What you do not understand is that pretending forced me to see a woman I had ignored for nearly 2 years." His voice carried across the hallway. "Sarah is honest, disciplined, and compassionate. She supports her mother, sacrificed her education for her family, and earns every dollar through work she performs with dignity. If anyone here believes she should feel ashamed of cleaning a house, then the shame belongs to the person who looks down on honest labor." Vanessa's face reddened. Daniel looked at Sarah. "I cannot claim we have been together for months. That part was untrue. But everything I said about respecting her is real. Everything I felt while dancing with her was real." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Daniel addressed the group again. "I have spent years among people who measure worth by wealth, family names, and invitations. Sarah possesses something far rarer than any of those things. She has character." No one laughed now. Aunt Carol lowered her eyes. Several relatives stepped away from Vanessa, uncomfortable with their own past behavior. Margaret reached Sarah and placed one arm around her. "My daughter has never had reason to be ashamed," she said. "Only reason to be tired." Vanessa's new husband, Victor, approached quietly. "That is enough," he told her. "This is my wedding, and you are turning it into a public punishment." For the first time, Vanessa seemed uncertain. Daniel looked at Sarah. "We can leave." Sarah wanted to disappear. Yet beneath the embarrassment, something had changed. Daniel had not protected the lie. He had protected her dignity by telling the truth. She wiped her tears. No. Everyone waited. Sarah faced Vanessa. Yes, I clean houses. I left school when my father became sick. I paid for medicine, buried him, and kept my mother from losing our home. I have spent years believing that survival made me inferior, because you described it that way. Her voice trembled, but she continued. I lied tonight because I was afraid. That was my mistake. But my work is not shameful. Being unmarried is not shameful. Having less money is not shameful. Cruelty is. Vanessa could not answer. Sarah turned toward Daniel. I am ready to leave now. They walked through the lobby together, followed by Margaret. Outside, warm rain had begun falling over Savannah. Sarah released Daniel's hand. You should attend your family's wedding upstairs. I am not leaving you. You have already done enough. I spoke because I meant it. That is what frightens me. Daniel studied her face. Tell me what you need. I need tonight to end. He nodded, though disappointment crossed his expression. Edward drove Sarah and Margaret home. Daniel sat across from them in silence. At the apartment entrance, Sarah thanked him without meeting his eyes. Tomorrow, everything returns to normal, she said. Daniel wanted to protest. Instead, he answered, Tomorrow, we will speak honestly. But when morning came, Sarah did not arrive at the estate. Sarah spent the next day avoiding her phone. Daniel called once, then sent a message asking whether she and Margaret were safe. He did not demand that she return to work. By afternoon, Sarah had written a resignation letter. Her mother found it on the kitchen table. You are leaving your job? I cannot walk through that house pretending nothing happened. Did he ask you to pretend? No. Then perhaps you are the only one demanding it. Sarah folded the letter. He is wealthy, older, and powerful. I depend on his salary. Even if his feelings are sincere, how could I know whether mine are gratitude, embarrassment, or something real? Margaret sat beside her. You cannot know while he remains your employer. That evening, Sarah went to the estate. Daniel waited in the library. He looked tired, as though he had not slept. I was worried, he said. I am resigning. He accepted the envelope but did not open it. Because of what happened? Because there can be no fair beginning between us while you sign my paycheck. Daniel was silent for a long moment. You believe there could be a beginning? I believe there could be confusion. That is more hopeful than a refusal. Please do not turn this into a negotiation. I will not. He placed the letter on the desk. You will receive everything owed to you. Rachel can provide a recommendation for any position you choose. I do not want special treatment. A truthful recommendation is not special treatment. Sarah nodded. Daniel walked toward the window. I meant what I said last night. I know. I will not pursue you while you are employed by me. Once your resignation is final, may I call you? Sarah felt the answer before she spoke it. Give me some time. How much? I do not know. Daniel smiled faintly. For a man accustomed to deadlines, that is difficult. You will survive. I hope so. In the following weeks, Sarah found temporary work at a small property management office owned by a widow named Helen Parker. Helen had attended the wedding and heard about the confrontation, though she never mentioned the scandal. You understand tenants, Helen said during the interview. I understand what it means to fear losing a home. That may be more valuable than a business degree. Sarah began answering maintenance requests, organizing rent assistance files, and helping elderly residents complete forms. For the first time in years, her work brought her close to the life she had once imagined. Daniel kept his distance. He sent no gifts and made no dramatic appearances. Once each week, he wrote a brief message asking how Margaret was doing. Sarah answered politely. Then Helen encouraged Sarah to return to college through an evening program. You have already done the difficult part, Helen said. You kept going when life gave you reasons to stop. Sarah enrolled in 2 classes. Meanwhile, Daniel changed as well. Catherine confronted him after hearing the story. "You ignored a woman in your own house for 2 years, then noticed her only when she needed rescuing." Daniel did not defend himself. "I know. If you truly care for her, do not make yourself the hero of her life." "What should I do?" "Become someone who can stand beside her without controlling the ground beneath her feet." Daniel began reviewing wages and benefits for every domestic employee at the estate and every maintenance worker in his company. He discovered policies he had never questioned because they had never affected him. Rachel helped establish education grants for employees and their families. Daniel insisted the program carry his late mother's name rather than Sarah's. Months passed. At Helen's office, Sarah helped organize a housing fair for families facing eviction after a hurricane damaged several neighborhoods. One of the participating companies was Whitmore Coastal Restoration. Daniel arrived wearing work boots instead of a suit. Their first conversation in months lasted only a few minutes. "You look well," he said. "So do you. I heard you returned to school." News travels quickly. "Helen is proud of you. She tells everyone." They stood among tables covered with applications and repair plans. "I have thought about you," Daniel said. Sarah looked toward the volunteers. "I have thought about you too. Would you have dinner with me? As your former employee? As a man who has rehearsed this question for months and still feels unprepared." She smiled. One dinner. Daniel chose a small neighborhood restaurant rather than an expensive dining room. They spoke for hours, not about the wedding, but about ordinary things: books, grief, work, and the loneliness of carrying responsibility. At the end of the evening, he walked her to her door. "I will not ask what this means," he said. "Good. I would like to see you again." "That is still a question." "Then I am asking." Sarah looked at him, no longer as the distant owner of a mansion or the rescuer who had defended her. She saw a man learning to listen. "Yes." Their relationship grew slowly. There were no secret arrangements and no invented memories. Each real moment replaced one they had fabricated. Their first disagreement concerned money. Daniel offered to pay Margaret's medical expenses, and Sarah refused. "I am not trying to purchase a place in your life," he said. "I know. But you solve problems with resources. I need you to understand that sometimes help can feel like control." He listened. Together they found another solution through insurance and a community program. Trust did not arrive like a miracle. They built it through patience, one honest decision at a time. When Daniel finally introduced Sarah to his family as his real partner, Catherine embraced her before anyone could speak. Aunt Rebecca studied them over dinner. So the arrangement continued after all. "No," Sarah said. "The arrangement ended. Something else began later." Rebecca smiled. "That distinction matters." Irene also returned briefly to Savannah. She requested a private conversation with Daniel, claiming she had reconsidered the past. Daniel declined. "I do not hate you," he told her, "but I no longer confuse familiarity with love." Irene glanced toward Sarah, who waited across the hotel lobby. "You truly chose her?" Daniel shook his head. "She is not an object I selected. We chose each other." Sarah heard only part of the exchange, but it was enough. Her own family changed more slowly. Aunt Carol apologized for laughing at Vanessa's old jokes. "I thought staying silent kept peace," she said. "It protected the person causing harm," Sarah replied. Carol accepted the correction. Vanessa did not apologize immediately. Her marriage became strained after Victor confronted her about the pleasure she took in humiliating others. For months, she avoided Sarah entirely. Then Margaret was admitted to the hospital after a severe infection. Sarah sat alone in the waiting room when Vanessa appeared carrying coffee. "I heard from Aunt Carol." Sarah accepted the cup but said nothing. Vanessa sat several chairs away. I was cruel to you because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That without money or admiration, I had nothing special. Whenever you survived something difficult, I felt smaller, so I tried to make you smaller first. Sarah looked at her. That explains it. It does not excuse it. I know. Vanessa's eyes filled. I am sorry. Sarah did not offer instant forgiveness. Some wounds required more than a sentence. But she allowed Vanessa to remain. Margaret recovered. During the weeks afterward, Vanessa drove her to appointments and helped with meals. Her apology became action, and slowly, the cousins began speaking again. A year after the wedding, Sarah completed the first stage of her degree. Helen promoted her to community housing coordinator. Daniel attended the small ceremony with Margaret, Catherine, Rachel, Edward, and several tenants Sarah had helped. Afterward, he took her to the marsh overlook where they had once stopped during one of their first real dates. I have something to ask. Sarah narrowed her eyes. You sound like a businessman again. I am terrified. It makes me formal. He did not kneel immediately. First, he took both her hands. I love the woman you were before I noticed you. I love the woman who challenged me when I believed generosity gave me the right to make decisions for others. I love the woman you are becoming, though I know she belongs to herself before she belongs beside anyone. Then he knelt. Will you build a life with me? Sarah laughed through tears. You restore buildings. I help people remain in them. That sounds almost practical. Is that a yes? Yes. They married the following spring, in a garden overlooking the Savannah River. The ceremony was simple by Daniel's family standards and extravagant by Sarah's, so they compromised. Good food, modest flowers, and donations to a housing fund instead of expensive gifts. Margaret walked Sarah down the aisle. Vanessa attended quietly and helped arrange the tables. She never tried to draw attention to herself. Edward drove the newly married couple home afterward. When Sarah stepped from the car, she looked at the Whitmore estate differently. It was no longer merely the mansion where she had cleaned rooms. Yet she refused to treat it as a trophy. She and Daniel converted an unused guest house into offices for a new foundation, supporting workers who wanted to complete interrupted education. Helen joined the advisory board. Rachel managed the scholarship program. Catherine organized fundraising events. Sarah finished her degree and became the foundation's director only after an independent board approved her appointment. She insisted on that condition. I will not spend my life wondering whether I earned my place, she told Daniel. You earned it before I knew enough to recognize it. Years later, their daughter Eleanor was born. Parenthood brought sleepless nights, spilled food, and arguments over whose turn it was to answer the crying. Daniel discovered that no amount of wealth could persuade an infant to respect a schedule. Sarah often laughed at him while he walked through the halls at dawn with Eleanor against his shoulder. One evening, after their daughter had fallen asleep, Sarah stood with Daniel in the same kitchen where he had once overheard her desperate phone call. Do you ever think about that day? She asked. Every time you use this corner to make a call. I was asking the universe for a fake boyfriend. And unfortunately, it sent me. She smiled. It sent a very complicated answer. Daniel placed an arm around her. Would you change anything? Sarah considered the humiliation, fear, and uncertainty that followed. I would change how long I believed other people were allowed to define me. But I would not erase the road that taught me otherwise. The years softened some memories and sharpened others. Sarah could no longer remember every cruel word spoken at Vanessa's wedding, but she remembered the feeling of Daniel's hand holding hers when the truth became public. More importantly, she remembered the moment she released that hand and stood for herself. That distinction remained important. Daniel had defended her, but rescue alone had not transformed her life. Transformation began when Sarah stopped treating survival as evidence of failure. She had believed that leaving college, cleaning houses, and caring for her parents meant she had fallen behind. Age and experience taught her that life was not a race conducted on equal ground. Some people began with inheritance, health, and encouragement. Others began with debt, grief, and obligations they never chose. Comparing their speed was never justice. As Eleanor grew, Sarah told her the story carefully. She did not describe it as a fairy tale in which a wealthy man saved a poor woman. She described two frightened adults hiding behind different kinds of pride. One had money but felt publicly rejected. The other had courage but had forgotten its value. Their false romance succeeded only because the arrangement forced them to speak honestly for the first time. Daniel also learned to tell the story without making himself heroic. He admitted that he had lived beside hard-working people without seeing their burdens. He had believed himself fair because he was never openly cruel. Sarah taught him that indifference could preserve unfairness just as effectively as cruelty. A person did not become compassionate merely by avoiding harm. Compassion required attention, humility, and the willingness to change systems from which one benefited. Vanessa's part in the story changed too. She remained responsible for what she had done, but she was not frozen forever as the villain of one terrible evening. Her apology mattered only when it became different behavior. Sarah's forgiveness did not mean forgetting or pretending the wound had never existed. It meant refusing to carry Vanessa's bitterness inside her own heart. When Margaret became older and moved into a small cottage near the estate, she often sat on the porch watching Eleanor chase fireflies. One evening she told Sarah, "I once believed the greatest gift Daniel gave you was love." Sarah smiled. "What do you believe now?" "That he gave you a moment in which you saw yourself through kinder eyes." Sarah shook her head gently. "He helped, but eventually, I had to learn to see myself without borrowing anyone else's eyes. That truth became the quiet lesson beneath everything that followed. Human worth did not rise when a wealthy person recognized it, nor fall when a cruel relative mocked it. Honest work remained honorable, whether performed in a mansion, an office, a hospital, or a field. Love could support dignity, but it should never replace it. A healthy relationship was not one person lifting another from beneath them. It was two people standing on level ground, even when their histories, incomes, and ages were different. Sarah had once wanted a boyfriend for one day because she thought another person's presence could protect her from shame. In time, she understood that no companion, fortune, title, or beautiful dress could permanently provide what self-respect had to build from within. Still, people were not meant to face every hardship alone. Daniel's hand mattered. Margaret's faith mattered. Helen's opportunity mattered. Rachel's kindness, Catherine's honesty, and even Vanessa's late repentance mattered. Independence did not mean refusing every hand. It meant knowing the difference between a hand that helped someone rise and one that expected ownership afterward. Late one night, Sarah and Daniel stood by the kitchen window while Savannah rested beneath the moonlit mist. Eleanor slept upstairs. Margaret's cottage light had gone dark. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator. "To think," Sarah said, "all of this began because I whispered that I needed a millionaire boyfriend by the next day." Daniel smiled. "You were very specific. I should have requested someone less stubborn. You would have become bored." She leaned against him and looked across the marsh. What began as a desperate lie had not become meaningful because fate rewarded deception. It became meaningful because, once the lie collapsed, they chose truth. They faced class, pride, grief, family judgment, and their own unequal positions, without pretending love automatically solved them. That was the life they eventually built. Not perfect, not rescued from difficulty, but honest enough to survive it. And for Sarah, that became far more valuable than any miracle she had once thought she needed.